Incremental routines. This is the 25th section of the Pleasurable Guide to SuperMemo, the Fluency cycle, and is dedicated to batch rescheduling operations. There are many. Do you see only for the contents I have a scroll bar, and that is just a tiny selection of what you can do. So what we will see in this section is the introduction, and we'll continue with the spreading, when to use it, when not to use it, then postponing, the parameters, some more steps, because there's a dialog with a few sections and tabs, so we'll see all of that, and then when to use it and when not to use it. Then dilute, when to use it, the autopostpone, we have seen postpone, then autopostpone, the pros and the cons, and then some more philosophy of the cons, and when to turn autopostpone on. You are aware of the risks and the side effects in the long term that are not obvious. Then we'll see the advance, which is the opposite. We will see again, that's an example, that we will see some other subsets. So before, in the subset, in the previous section, we only covered a few. Here's another one. So we wait until we have the section, so it's useful, because those subsets, automatic subset files, are just because of rescheduling. But even though we are not going to see not even 10% of those. Then we'll see rescheduling per element, not in bulk, in contrast, so we're aware of what can be done per element and in bulk, which is not exactly the same. And finally, we will see an overview of Mercy, how to use it. We're not going to use it. It's way too advanced. And then comparing everything that we have seen so far. So like a table, to have the big picture, the context when you should use this feature, the requirements, the pros and cons, or the main pro and the main con. So as a sort of recap, and again, this in the mastery, it's like tenfold. There's plenty more. Perhaps everything has been introduced, so the name, the jargon, is already there, but just Mercy. This is, in atomic videos, was more than 30, just Mercy. So you take into account, it will be 30 here, all of that contents will be just for Mercy. So you have a little comparison. But again, the main is in returns. You have most of the value and theoretically most of what you need as a fluent. But I have followed a strategy that I need to show you the advance as well, so then you realize, hey, I don't need it. But if I'm just telling you, it doesn't have the same effect. And since it's very short, I just do atomic videos, it's no big deal. So by the end of the video, you will be able to more or less respond to some of the scenarios that could happen in your life with SuperMemo. That I have stopped using SuperMemo for 2 weeks and I come back, or the burden is too high, or whatever, you could respond to this. The regular cases. That is something more niche, more specific, concrete, or you want to know the details. Master the cycle. So without further ado, let's start the section. So we start with the rescheduling section of the course. So first let's see the introduction, because what do we mean by rescheduling? You know that in SuperMemo, we have seen already in the space repetition section, everything is scheduled according to space repetition, the items. But the other elements, the non-item elements, are also scheduled, following another algorithm. Then everything, you also know that the user, it's a semi-god, can overrule virtually anything that SuperMemo does. That means that whatever SuperMemo schedules to the future, hey, this will be outstanding that day, you can overrule it. At the time of the repetition, when I see this, that is outstanding, and I see it, I can postpone it, delay it, skip it, dismiss it, delete it, and so on. But I can do this preemptively, that, hey, I just check what they have in SuperMemo course, and I can delay all of that without doing the repetition. Therefore, rescheduling means modifying the date, the outstanding date, according to the SuperMemo algorithms, whatever that is. Ahead of time, later, much later according to some metrics, or I just say 1000 days. Boom. Whatever that is. I don't even know if I said 1000 days, if this is going to be shorter or not, because I'm setting the number regardless of the reference point. All of these are rescheduling features. In SuperMemo, it's massive. Just to let you know that this is the Fluency track, and we will cover some of those in more or fewer details. We're going to see then some we could say that Mercy is the final boss of the rescheduling, batch rescheduling features, operations, and we're just going to see it. Hey, just to let you know, this exists, it's like this, and it's different from the others what we have seen in this and that, but we're not going to see it. It's too much power. You're going to screw up your collection big time, and it's not required. That makes a difference because in the mastery track, I have listed all of the videos already. And on this section, which in the mastery track, there are different sections, are more than 300 videos. So, if you want to know the ins and outs, what happens behind the curtains, the consequences, long-term consequences, the use cases of every single possible rescheduling feature in SuperMemo, it's a big deal. So let's start first with the easy stuff. That's all for now, and at least we have learned in this video what we mean by rescheduling. So now we will start with learning the batch rescheduling operations, which I think is the easiest, and is the spread. Okay. So we have done subsets already. So I will do just a subset. Let's see, I will do language. Okay. And then is, you know what, I have too many elements in my outstanding queue. Therefore, I want to do, it's not postpone, it's learning. And here we have something else, and it's spread. Don't ask me why postpone is not inside learning or advance, even though it's more or less the same thing. Then spread says reschedule all elements in a given period, or subset Mercy. And we have seen the final boss, it's Mercy. We're not going to see it, only to announce it. So let's do subset Mercy. Do you want to reschedule all browser elements? Yes or no? And that's the fact. It will change every single element. So yes. Okay. Then, even if it's a subset Mercy, it reuses the same menu and it says Mercy. But we are not using Mercy, because Mercy is the entire collection. This is the contents of the browser, in this case 17,000 elements. Then this is very easy to understand. Those are the elements that are now. By default, it's 1 day. Meaning that if I had to review all of the elements in 1 day, I have to do them all. Easy, 17,526. Then, if I do 10 days, I will do 10% of each case. Update, click on update, here you go. 1700 is still too much, right? I can estimate and spread them equally. So whatever I have, spread this equally in period of days. If I say 100, every single day, they will be the same amount of elements per day. 176 is still quite a lot, but well, it's language learning, it's not that much for language learning. And I can see the date this will be, because I'm saying days. So in 100 days will be October 9th, 2026, next year for me. Awesome. Then you also have the outstanding elements as a reference. This is a backup, I have 20,000. That's actually not the case. In my genuine collection, I have more than that, as a reference, but it's not binding for anything. And here you have the preview like in prose, in natural language. Choosing OK will result in scheduling that many repetitions. Sorry, that many elements, all of the elements in the subset. Concluding from a period of 100 days, this raw scheduling period, in a period from today until this date. Here you go, this one here. With how many repetitions, number of elements per day. But what happens? That I'm taking the assumption that I will do one repetition and I'm not going to see this element once again, or at least within this range of 100 days. Which it's true, because if you take into consideration the interval, look, 1,600, but hey, there's one that has 1 day. There will be some other cases that are new or have been lapsed. Therefore, there's a checkbox, and this will make a difference. Update. Oh, perhaps there are not many, or is not they don't change much, but could be the case that if most of the elements had an interval of a day, 3 days, checking this box will make a big difference, because that considers that, hey, the next repetition is within the scope of the 100 days. Therefore, the user will do a second repetition on that item. Therefore, you will need more days to the 100, if this makes sense. Awesome. Then, we can also do the other way around. Not how many days I want to spread, but how many elements I want per day. No, I only want 20, like Anki style, right? Then, it says, hey, too much. There's a limit. You can reschedule. You can spread. Spread is one way to reschedule, and it's 1,826 days. So basically, in other words, 5 years. I cannot send anything longer than 5 years. That means that this considered future repetitions, now it's a big deal, because unwilling, without realizing, now the scope, it was not 100 days, the scope is 5 years. So this has a huge difference now, because how many flashcards I will see again, meaning the next interval will be 5 years or less. Those are 300 days, less than a year. The next interval could be within 5 years. It's feasible. And so on. Now, if I update this to 20 once again, here you go. Do you see? But I'm not considering the future, which will pile up. And the ones that I will fail even more. So they will be new. There will be the next repetition will be beyond the scope. They will be in 10 years, let's say. But hey, I failed it. It is reset to a few days, and this will require more repetitions. So this is not even considered. Awesome. Then that means, oh my god, that only this, which is a small subset of my collection, already requires 2.5 years. It's massive. Look, 2028, by the end of March. So it's more than you may think of. And here you are neglecting priorities, if there are glitches, how many repetitions there are already. You don't care about that. You just spread equally by the appearance. That means that the first 20 that appear until the eupatheia, boom, tomorrow. From the 21st to 40. The next day for tomorrow. Pam, 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 pam. Regardless of the interval they have and so on. This is spreading. Then, don't take the criteria into consideration. Just leave the defaults. This is especially useful when you use the real mercy for the entire collection. Not the subset mercy, also known as postpone. Leave the defaults. For the fluency, we won't tackle that. Now I will do it. Click OK. And now this opens the workload calendar. We have seen that already. And hey, look how many repetitions, item repetitions I have. Are in the 20s. because I added 20 per day, meaning this had 4, this had 2, this had 6, and so on. So it's something feasible, and I will have this until when? 2028. Do you see? Up to here, more or less the end of March 2028. That's why then I no longer have 20. So it's exactly what we did, and I can see those. For instance, the last subset. Those are the very last elements I had in the browser window, and those are pushed the latest. So what I'm going to see, the repetition will be in 2.5 years. And because of that, look at the priority. They are very close to the same. Okay. Hope it's easier to understand. So, and again, this is the easiest to understand. Now that we have seen how we can use the spread functionality, we're going to see some use cases. When you should use spread? After importing a large deck or collection, or a branch. For another collection, I import the branch, or I merge the entire collection. I could do that. Or I import the deck from Anki, let's say, from XML. Any XML import in SuperMemo becomes, by default, pending. So one of the things I can do is to, let me do a spread. So I add 10 elements, usually only items if it's an import, in my outstanding queue. Usually, not limited, but usually will be vocabulary, if it's language, or anatomy, or something that is like curriculum-based, closed curriculum for university, college, school, whatever. This is an outlier already. If you use incremental reading, you are not going to, or you haven't used any other app before, you start from scratch. Incremental reading in SuperMemo, you're not going to see this flow. Another case is when you have added a lot of similar material. For instance, if it's language, I added a lot of conjugations, right? It's complex, not necessarily it's easy to understand, but it's hard to memorize because it's a semantic. It's okay, the past participle of this, it's that, okay. Maximum I can use mnemonics to remember that. And if it was incremental reading, something I did in the past, that are logical fallacies, or in the English collection you have a lot of similar looking birds with a very obscure names in Latin, stuff like that. So learning in sequence will be too hard because they're too similar to each other. What I'm going to do is combat the interference. How? I will I create them all in sequence via subset, let's say. I create about 50. Then on those 50, I will put them on the browser. And it's, I will let SuperMemo show me one a day. So schedule, spread them once per day up to 15 days. So I guarantee I won't have 2 or 10 at the same time. But there are cons to do that, because that means that one will have one day interval, the next will have a second day interval, The latest will have about 50-day interval already, which could be too much. Let's consider this. Instead of 50 will be 50, 100. Remember that if you put this into a year, like we did in the example of the video, that means that the interval, if it's the first time I set, there are no repetitions. The first repetition will be after a year. If I succeed, SuperMemo will put 5 years next or more. Have this in mind. We're not going to see the ins and outs of every single use case. Here's just one example that in the mastery track we will do, and they are not sharing the same cons or pros, but they are diminishing returns at maximum. Then, the next is pre-dice reviews or new material. I want to spread what is new, so it's just a tiny part of my time. Let's say I have only 20 minutes. It's very low, right? Very tiny section. That includes the reading, everything, not just the execution of the flashcards. Then, I can use a sorting criteria. I can do a subset to force certain criteria, not just my sorting one. But let's say that I have only time for 100 reviews, and 100 new items are waiting in the sense that are pending. And I need, boom, memorized and not memorized tomorrow, all of them. Perhaps I don't want that. So I will use the spread to just show me a few of them, because I want to be very incremental introduction. Because most of my session, I want something to be what I do, not what I have added. For instance, I have done the opposite. I merged one collection, the English collection, and some branches were kind of neglected. And yeah, let me just do it. 50 a day. Yep. Why I can do that? Because even though are 50 repetitions, it's more than what I do in incremental reading, by the way. Those 50 are like 3 seconds each. Those are 5 minutes. I still spend more time with the rest. So always there is some nuance, depends on the case. And finally, the latest case you should use a spread is to keep your daily workload stable. If you have it inconsistent, or you have done something in binged here and there, or you have been playing with SuperMemo, you were not sure, so you have a split and merged collections here and there several times, it's quite messy. You can do it to have something more manageable, especially if it's quite new. The collection is a few months old. You can do it. Please don't do it just because you are used to Anki, let's say, and regardless of the case, you will do it. No, I was just 100 repetitions a day, regardless of my collection. No, that is a very, very destructive thing to do. You will understand later in this section, but not now. Because now we are learning ourselves about when you should use a spread in your collection, if you ever want to use it then. Then let's see when you should not use a spread. You may think that, hey, it's a good option, but not the case. First, for small batches of items, even if they are related, that is from a table or are also known as of the same word or theorem or whatever, just let it be. For this, it's an overkill. It's like saying which machine gun should I use to kill a fly. Come on, you can do it with your fingers. Then, if you're cramming, if you happen to use SuperMemo for cramming, I hope you don't, but if that's your life, your reality, then use SuperMemo because you will at least do it the smartest way possible to suffer the least possible. In this case, it's not required to spread. Because with a spread, you will say, hey, I guarantee I will do this before the exam. Yes, but only once. Perhaps you want to do something else instead and do subsets, as we have seen, especially subsets with control, subsets with review all, with the shift modifier. Because then I don't need to reschedule. I don't even reschedule. I do the repetition when I want to, via subset. That was not outstanding. I didn't even bother modifying this to be tomorrow or to spread this. That's it. And then, when you should not use it, when you should not use a spread, is when items you're already reviewing. Meaning, there are already repetitions. There are repetition history on those items. I have done that on the video that I did all of my language items. 16,000, sorry, a selection, 16,000. About 16,000 items. But some of them, as you remember, they had 1,000 days, interval, and so on. Oopsie doopsie. Why I shouldn't do that? because it's an overkill, first. And second, I don't have any control. Because if we go back, I think it was, let me just do, now I cannot get the same. Why? Because I have rescheduled those. But you get my point. It's more or less equivalent. If those are high intervals and so on, I'm killing all of this, and following the example I did, is 20. So the first 20 will be tomorrow, interval 1. The next to 21 to 40 will have an interval of 2. I'm smashing, deleting all of this history, and the spaced repetition is completely killed. So I will start as it was due. Perhaps it would have been better if I have sorted by interval. So I start with the shortest interval already, if you get my point. Then why I did it, so I can say this now, by the way, I planted the seed, and because it was a lot easier to understand what it was doing. And because we are in the Fluency. So just telling you, now don't do this, it's enough. In the mastery we will see exactly the pros and cons, and perhaps you can do it, but at least knowing what you're doing, the consequences you will be facing. There's no right and wrong. The thing that I consider wrong is when you make a decision that is not educated. You lack knowledge. And you will have a result that is different of what you think. I have seen this so many times in this section, rescheduling operations. So when you should not use spread, if you're cramming, if there is still history, at least more than one repetition, or there are not enough elements. So do it when it's significant, or just don't bother. Now let's introduce another batch operation for rescheduling, and is the postpone. Could be the one that you will hear the most or read the most often in the documentation. So it's learn, postpone, and elements, items, or topics is the same. Okay. Then you have the scope. You have a few tabs. Parameters will be discussed in the next video. Adjust, we will go to see this last. We start with the scope. First is what? All of sudden repetitions. Why? What I have done is go to the main menu. I'm not in a subset. What I could do is, no, let me do a subset. But now if I put branch, I postpone, it will still say postpone outstanding elements, my entire one, or current browser. But there's no browser, it's not open. That's why it's, no. First, let me see, view, I want to see, semi-leeches. So therefore I want to postpone the semi-leeches. Very bad example because I only have 2, 3. Okay, I don't have many, but you will get my point. Then I go to process, browser, and postpone. It's the same dialog. The only difference is that instead of outstanding repetitions, it's current browser. And can you guess the third option? It is from the subset, exactly, meaning that if I click here, process branch, and postpone, it's a branch or a Crutch group. So the subset is telling me already more or less how I get there, how I trigger the postpone. It is using the same dialog, and in case you want, it's, you know what, let me do entire collection. Boom, you just click, you don't have to quit, go back to the menu and so on. Usually what I suggest is always a branch or a concept or a browser. When a browser, when it's not as easy as everything is in one folder. It's because you have done a search or filtering, whatever. Nice. The method we will see in the next video with the parameters, as well as the settings. Then you can simulate before doing the postpone. Why? Because there's no undo. And then you have the third option, that is adjust. Then there's also Autopostpone, we'll see this next. we can have all of the elements, just the topics, just the items, but any of the options you do will go to the same place, to this dialog. The only thing that changes is this. Do you see? Now I only postponing topics. Now I only skipping items. Because this means skipping the postponing. Therefore, they will be untouched. This will be. Do you see I cannot have both at the same time? Because then it will be useless. I skip everything, right? But what I can do is have both. So we already know the difference of postponing elements, topics, and items. It's just a shortcut. You go to the same place. Second, you have some parameters. The delay factor in percentage, meaning whatever interval already has, add a quarter of that. So if it's 100 days, add 25 days. If it's just 10, add 2 days and a half, rounded up to 3, and so on. So you keep this relative spacing. Then let me use the defaults, by the way. Awesome. So by default, you already know that for items is 20, for topics is 50. Then we have maximum and minimum intervals, how much you are going to set it to feature, meaning that it has a super long interval of 500 days. 20% would be what? 100. No, it will be 50. It's overruled. So even if mathematically it will be 20, it's capped. And then those are skipping, in case I have skipping items, by the way. That means that I'm not going to postpone all of the items I have in my outstanding queue. No, I am only to postpone the ones that fit at least one criterion. Not all of them, at least one. For instance, if the interval is more than 500 days, it will be skipped, ignored. This is not going to be postponed. Or if the forget index, which forget index? Sorry, if it's not skipped, it will be used. Exactly the opposite of what I just said. The default is 10, right? So I want to postpone everything that has more than the default. That's what I can do. The factor that we're not going to touch it, I think you cannot now not touch it because in SuperMemo 17 already is not used for items, so it's meaningless, but you do it for topics. So the topics with a high A factor will increase quicker, so you don't want perhaps to postpone them that easily. Or postpone count. So I want to postpone this, but it has been postponed so many times already, don't touch it ever. Or priority, the most interesting one. If it's 6% or higher, so the number is lower, don't postpone it. That means that if any of these hits, it will be skipped. Meaning, in other words, that the item will be postponed if the interval is shorter than 500 days. The desired forget index is 10 or less. It has been postponed up to 49 times already, and the priority is 6 or lower. This depends on everyone. That's why you have all of these metrics to decide. And the same for topics, but for topics you don't want the same criteria. For instance, for me, it will be like, 3% is already quite good, because that's already above my priority protection, by the way. Depends how many topics you have. Perhaps it will be 10% or whatever you want. We are not going to cherry pick here cases. We will do in the mastery track. Just to let you know that whatever you do, you can click on simulate and see how many elements will be skipped. Because perhaps I think, that is more or less what I want. And then I see that only 50 elements are affected. Pretty useless. If I have 100,000 and only 50 are postponed, look at that. 20, a few thousand. Here you go. That's awesome. 6,000. The average, that will be delayed in percentage. Skipped. That means that 6,700 fit some of the criteria. The interval was beyond 500, or the forget index was higher, And same for topics. I didn't focus on the topics, but same. 15,000 were skipped. Nice. If that is good, then you will click on postpone and do it for real. Why? Because there's no undo. At least you can simulate. Then, which numbers to put here and so on? Mastery track. Rule of thumb and rest rule of thumb. Just to let you know that those parameters are used if you have this option, this method. Skip elements as defined by parameters. Next page. The next page means next tab, the parameters tab. So you have this by priority. It could be the same thing if you leave everything empty but the priority. We have the same effect. This is more heuristic. I only want to keep 10% of my priority queue. What is lower, be postponed regardless of whatever. Easy. And you can have multiple settings. So you can have this as, I don't know, I will call it my main. I will have wanted this more drastic. And I can put it, for instance, my postpone. I want only when I only want to check the topics. You have the default, the latest you have done, whatever that is, and the ones you have saved. So this is useful if you postpone with, for instance, I want language learning to be postponed in a different manner. I can afford longer intervals, neglect more the collection, especially English, not for incremental reading. So what I will do is actually something different. So something you can do is whatever you have chosen, that's what I want, now you save it. And that is my main setting. Here you go. So next time, instead of changing the parameters every single time and so on, instead of restoring defaults, you will do instead, I wanted my postpone. Boom. And now you see are different. It's a year, and the numbers have changed. Cool. Remember, not cool. You need to click on that now. And now will be used. I did that on purpose. If this is not checked, you are just doing, yes, you have changed the setting that is active, but only the priority will have been used. It's very easy to overlook those details because how the user interface is designed, it's quite poor. So it's very easy to neglect something or to misclick and trigger something with a different setting that you want. And in this section it's really important because you will affect your collection big time. And you will need a very long time to realize the changes you have done. Because remember, the scope we have seen in the latest video, the other video, was up to 800 days and up to 5 years. 2,800 I think it was. So I'm affecting the collection. The effects I'm doing will have up to 5 years lasting effects. It's a big deal. You don't want to just mess with not clicking here before clicking postpone. Because assume you have realized that after a few weeks, I don't want to recover from a backup of a few weeks. Then you have to deal with this. That's why I do insist so much with this. So we are already familiar with postpone. We have seen the scope and the parameters tab. Now it's time for the adjust. And it says, first we have a section, sub-branch postpone. What? Choose how postpone should be applied to sub-branches which have their own what? Their own postpone settings. Because I'm using the knowledge tree. Could be the case if I use this here, there are subsections, there's more, right? There are more levels, not just one. At least here I can already tell you, here I have 2 more, do you see? SuperMemo course, Rescheduling operations, intro. Okay, so this already tells me that perhaps I have some settings of one folder that is nested. hierarchy down on the descendants, not necessarily children, descendants. The second level, third level, and so on. Awesome. Why? Do you see the scope? I can save new. Why? Because could be the case that in the branch of SuperMemo course I have saved some settings. It's not the case, but could be that one I have already did. As we have seen in the video, that I had some options, right? Then A, the branch scope is using some settings, right? Then if I'm using a parent, what should we do? No, respect the settings. Meaning that if one of the children has its own defined settings, use them over the settings of the parent. Or no, by the way, I can see this list. Kidam, my branch, Pleasurable learning, root is the same thing, is the first element, or Hangul. In this case, genuine, in my collection, I have, for Korean, I overrule it, because Korean for me is different. I cannot do the same thing as if it was English. It's harder for me, right? So the postponing will be more lenient. Even if it's low priority, it will be more lenient. Or I will forget everything, right? So first you're going to click on the list to see what you have done already. Then in this case, it's no, respect the settings, because if it happens that I have some Korean in the hierarchy, respect it. Or it can be dynamic. Always choose the most conservative settings or the most liberal, the opposite. Conservative settings is whatever is more restrictive in the settings to postpone. So one said 10%, the other said, one says 10% priority, the other says 50. Get the 10%. It's more conservative. The most liberal will be, no, get the 50. Could be the case when you have a lot of mixed stuff. Not in my case. It's very segregated. Therefore, just in case, if I have something else that is not Korean, let me do the most conservative, whatever that is. If I had more, in my case, I don't have more than that. But if I had more, it will be the option I will choose. So those are the sub-branch postpones, especially when you already have settings applied and if you are nesting. One solution, if there are siblings, you could say, if I go to a different, just to make my point, is no, let me do a postpone in English and independent postpone in Korean, because our now siblings are easy to do. Yes and no, because in English I also have Korean. For convenience, when I use AI to describe an image, you know what, let me just do the same with Korean. And I do it right there. Because I do use the image, and the context. I have then the template. So I can tell you, this exists, because if I go to templates and I get the Korean, I filter by branch and I put English. So that depends. If it's very segregated, meaning there's no chance, there's no need for you to use this feature, because again, there's no chance, don't waste your time. If you use SuperMemo with some flexibility, that most of the Koreans here, but could be anywhere in my collection, then you may have might want to change the setting. We were seeing the Adjust tab of the Postpone. Now we have left the checkboxes. Okay. Then if I reset everything by default, seems to be that this is ignore settings and the two boxes. Before going to details what they do, now I have unchecked them. If I do reset the defaults, parameters, I'm also modifying the adjust. Again, poor design from SuperMemo, because if I restore here from this tab, my common sense will tell me that the scope is only from this. I'm modifying what is in this tab. But no, you're also modifying this one. Consider this. Okay. Then, include elements that are not outstanding. What does that mean? If I check this will dilute the learning process, of course. And now, let me uncheck the other ones. This is the same as mercy. We have presented before that postponing was the same as mercy. Subset, yeah, but again, we are in the fluency track. There are always the sub-details here and there. In reality, it is, but not necessarily. You can postpone only what is outstanding. Next, when you want to do this, mastery track. Don't do that. Then modify item delay proportion to forgetting index. This is especially useful if you have different requested forgetting indexes. If you always use the default, this will be absolutely nothing because everything is at 10%. It's 100% homogeneous. So the proportion of the same is itself, not change. Even if this is checked by default, it will have no effect. Third, modify topic delay in proportion to a factor. It's more or less the same. Remember that items have the factor, but it's no longer used by the algorithm. It's legacy. It's still there because SuperMemo runs different versions of the algorithm, and one of the older versions still use it. That's why. But SuperMemo 17 already didn't use it. But for topics, it's what you will use instead. That means that the higher the A factor, the higher the delay. You have this in proportion. Topics or the opposite. Topics with lower A factors will suffer less delay. So you use the A factor more or less as a magnifier, if you want that. Use cases of this, mastery track. And lastly, modify delay in proportion to element priority. Why element? Because they are both items and topics, and this could be more interesting. So, by average, if you remember some videos ago, when I did the simulation, it was 97 days by average, right? Perhaps it was more or less the same for everyone. If I do by priority, means the highest priority will be not touched or just postponed by 1 day or very few, and the lower the priority, the most will be postponed. Let's say 97 days as average, but a few days, the higher priority, and 300, the lowest priority elements. So the distribution is less even though the average will be exactly the same. But here what's boss is the priority. And that's not all. You can say I want the priority at the same time that for topics I consider the A factor. That will segregate, that will distinguish topics of high A factor and high priority, which is unusual but could happen. And even if it's not dramatic difference, there will be some difference. This is kept. And the same for items. I can do everything. And if I want to include the non-outstanding, I can do that at the same time. But remember, this is binded to the parameters, meaning that if instead of ignoring, I will do the more conservative, this is not necessarily kept. Because if one of the children sub-branches has a setting that is more liberal, and this is not checked, what happens now? Mastery track. We will simplify that if you put the most conservative. And what you do here is what you will see. If the children uses something else, only is the parameter, not the adjust. They are seeing some bugs here and there that is not exactly what the documentation says, but are the diminishing returns at best. Because this requires that you use postpone. You use postpone more than once. You use postpone in branches that have custom settings that you have used in the past. And you need every time to accumulate a backlog. So you will need a few years to have something meaningful use to know those little details. It's way too soon, mostly useless for you now. Mastery track only. We will actually see one detail in the Fluency about postponing, and it's the limitation, the built-in by design limitations of intervals. First, the only one we have seen so far is that this maximum scope of rescheduling is 5 years window. That doesn't mean that the interval will be 5 years longer. Is whatever it is, it was 1,600 days already, and I stretch it to 1,800. So in reality, I'm only increasing by 200 days. Consider this have this in mind, it's not the same. Then you could say, hey, I cannot set the minimum interval greater than 30 days in Postpone. So you remember, learn Postpone Parameters. So here, I can say, hey, for items, I can see the maximum 300. And the minimum is 10% of that. For topics would be 100 days and maximum 500. What does that mean? That now if I set something larger or something lower than that minimum 15 and maximum 1000, and now I simulate, do you see it got reset? 300? It was 1000. Hey, but 15 was not modified at all. Okay. That's because now this is dated. It's the only thing I got from the documentation. Actually, it's not from the documentation, it's from the SuperMemo, and it's from 1 decade ago already. But at least I can verify that this stays true. The maximum is 300. Let's try the minimum 1. Yep, now it's 1. So now we know that this is 1. Okay. I just reformulated this. So then, if I go to Postpone once again, now let's see topics. Maximum, it was 300. I will put 1000 as well. Sorry, 500 for topics. And the minimum was 100. Let me put 1. Let me simulate. Boop, do you see? It was set to 500. So actually, what stays true in SuperMemo 19, or I don't know specifically which version, but compared to 10 years ago, at least we know that items and topics have a maximum interval maximized, capped by design, being 300 and 500. You cannot postpone for more than that. Keep in mind this is close to a year, about 10 months, and the maximum for topics is 1 month and more than a year already. So it's quite generous. And the minimum can be just 1 single day. You put it to tomorrow. Now that we know what is postpone, we will see when you should use postpone, the use cases. That doesn't mean you have to use it. It's if you want to use it, there are here some cases. First, after a vacation or a break. Could be because of a high workload, illness, you just moved on because you were fed up with SuperMemo, whatever reason. Then you come back after 2 weeks and oh my god, I have a lot of outstanding material. Then it's impossible to do them all. It's 500 topics reviews, that's way too much, right? I will need more than 24 hours in a day to compensate that. So one of the things, not the only thing, one of the things you can do is to apply Postpone to more or less clear this review depth. And it will have consequences that we will see. Another case is when your daily workload is acutely overwhelming. So even though perhaps you didn't do any break, you have to use SuperMemo every day, perhaps that's actually the reason. Because you have used it actively every single day and you were too aggressive creating close deletions or extracts, now you have too much material. For instance, I import the Incremental Learning article from Piotr Wozniak. I split, I extract, oh my god, I have 500 elements in 1 day and I have more than 200 to review tomorrow. I won't have time, right? So postpone can give you a sense to have not a day off necessarily, but more or less the workload that is more manageable, that you can get to zero by the end of the day. Not that you need to, but it's one option. Third, to deprioritize a specific branch. For instance, let's say that you have a high priority of medical school and a low priority of whatever. I put trivia, all capitals. I hope it's not this, but it's just free learning. Whatever else is not in the medical school that the person does because they want. Then what you could do, assuming more or less the load is the same, is say, yeah, let me auto-postpone only the non-medical stuff. I free my time to the more important material because I have exams, most likely, or because it's higher priority. Therefore, the lower priority stuff, regardless of the content, could be also some of the medical stuff. Boop, I push it. I do postpone that. It's the same as before, but with some criteria. And that's about it. So after a break, when you have too much load, or when the load is from a specific place, could be a branch, a concept group, or whatever, and you want to deprioritize, one of the things you can do is just deprioritize, and that's it. Therefore, they will be sitting and piling up. That's it. Or you can do postpone if you want to. Then we will see when not. You shouldn't do auto-postpone. Trigger auto-postpone. Even though it may sound obvious, it's every day. Well, actually, yes, you can do that. And there's a name, and we will see this later in this section, and it's auto-postpone. That this is triggered every day. Doesn't mean that it has effect every single day. It's triggered every single day, but because there are some criteria, perhaps no element is met in that criteria and nothing is postponed. It's an important nuance. Because it's triggered every day doesn't mean it's effective every day. Then why you should not do this every day? Because then why you want an algorithm if you postpone every single day? It becomes absurd, right? That could mean that you have added new material too quickly by splitting or by importing, especially XML. The solution is not to keep postponing. It's to stop adding new material and use a spread more aggressively. If you remember, we use a spread. So instead of postponing, use a spread. And that means that if you keep this flow, it will get worse. You're adding more material than you can process. So let's say that you can process half of the collection, then only 10% of the collection, then only 1% of the collection. And you will have 1 million elements when you can only manage 5,000. Just to say something. So that's not a useful flow. Not part of this video. Then, when not to apply postpone on new or unlearned material? That would be pending. Why? Postpone has zero effect on your outstanding queue. Keep in mind, they don't have an interval. They are not no items. As you remember the video we have seen, there are no items in SuperMemo. They are in the outstanding already. Because when you do the cancellation, this has an outstanding date. So eventually it will be in the outstanding date, in the outstanding queue. But if you use the pending queue, that's the unlearned material. I'm just waiting there until you finish the first stage, which is the outstanding. But what happens? I no longer ever finish this step. How come I'm going to go to the new material, right? Therefore, do postpone to unscheduled material items doesn't have any effect. What you can do is first set remember because setting remember forces them to be scheduled, therefore simulating the first repetition. They are now in the outstanding queue, or eventually they will be in the outstanding queue. And then you can use spread, because you don't want the 1,000 items to become outstanding in the next 3 days. One of the solutions. And when not to use postpone is on high priority knowledge. Postpone is not a magic button, it has a real cost. The cost will be forgetting, missing out, and so on. Therefore, if it's high priority knowledge, you want that knowledge. That this cannot be today, it will be tomorrow. That is not tomorrow, next week. That is not next week, it will be eventually. It doesn't matter if you don't see the 0 in the outstanding. This is one of the worst drugs you can get. If you feel euphoria when you have 0, 0, I finished outstanding, you have a problem. You shouldn't. You shouldn't feel the euphoria that, oh, I finished, what's outstanding? First. And second, if you finish outstanding, you're doing something wrong. You're cheating, basically. You're not doing everything in SuperMemo, not properly doing incremental reading, or you're massively postponing or autopostponing. So, as we have seen, when not to use autopostpone is every day, so or even more frequently, that I can finish outstanding queue. Let me postpone everything left in the outstanding queue, regardless of the criteria of autopostpone that we will see later. Or on unlearn new unlearned material, especially it comes from imports. Don't use postpone for that. And high priority knowledge. Just let it pile up. That it's 2% priority range, and you're in the 0.5. Well, 0.5, 0.6, eventually you will get to the 2%. No. I will change my postponing settings to 0.7, so everything above 0.7 gets postponed, so I can zero off the outstanding queue every single day. It's just a vanity metric that you are just harming to yourself. You are only creating damage here. There's nothing positive. 0. I want to emphasize that, even though it's not the point of this video, it's so relevant, so important, that I want to make it clear in different videos. Now let's quickly introduce dilute. So if I open this in the browser, so I have the menu, we have postpone, right? But postpones the repetitions of the outstanding elements. So in the list, whatever is outstanding, it will be sent to the future. All of them will be rescheduled. The ones that are not outstanding, they won't be affected. That's why one of the non-use cases were the pending elements. Because pending elements cannot be outstanding, so it's useless. You will need to set remember before. Awesome. Instead, dilute, which is in learning, and dilute is not in the same level. Dilute affects everything. So everything is postponed. Everything is modified to the future. If it's outstanding or not, I don't care. So let's say that I have everything outstanding, and I have some that become outstanding next year, and it doesn't matter. It will be rescheduled, even if it's 1 year afar. So learn and dilute. It says, warning, this will dilute the learning process. Yeah, that's the name, that's exactly what I want. And then I have the exact same menu that we have seen before, the postponing. The only difference is the title, it says dilute. And the subset doesn't say all outstanding repetitions, but current browser. Why? Because all outstanding repetitions would be, I'm assuming outstanding elements, means postponing, is postpone, not dilute. Remember that. Just a reminder, selected branch or concept group would be a subset the current browser. That can be any arbitrary selection of the collection, any subset from a search and whatever filter you may use. And if you don't use any subset, you're doing mercy, not postponing. Nice. So that's everything you need to know. We are not going to go into details because it's the exact same copy, the same we have seen with postponing. The only difference that you have to take into account all of the elements. Now that we have introduced dilute, let's see when you should use dilute, if you really want to. When you should use deprioritizing, when you should dilute to deprioritize an entire topic, not topic in the sense of an element type, but in the sense of an event in history, something specific, a topic. In this case, the main reason will be to use dilute, not postponing. Imagine you have added a large branch of material on a specific subject, but you have decided it's no longer high priority. I want to move on, but I don't want to delete, right? What's the problem? If you use postpone here, the outstanding items today will be scheduled for tomorrow or in a few days. Depends on the settings. In a few days. Then after that will be postponed again after a while, and eventually they will be outstanding because they no longer fit the criteria of being postponed. And it will take your time eventually. So what's the solution? Using dilute instead of postpone on the entire branch because it spreads all of its elements. But wait a second, spreads using English language, not to spread the feature in SuperMemo. That this spreads equally the same amount of topics, elements per day. Then, all the elements, meaning outstanding, pending, a schedule or not, or a long period of time. So it's not just a few days, it will be postponed for a few days, no, because you want to clear out the outstanding queue and cheat your way out. No, it's something that will be longer in the future, first, and it's everything. Even if it was scheduled for next week or next month, then it will be 6 weeks or 3 months instead. So this effectively reduces the daily loading load and emphasis on the entire subject area. Imagine you are watching different TV shows, Netflix shows, right? And okay, I started with Grey's Anatomy. Oh my god, how many seasons there are? I'm fed up. I want a break. I don't want to see any episode in a while. Therefore, I'm not going to do postponing because it will appear eventually again, soon, or will be postponed several times, and eventually they will be added in the playlist. I don't want that. Therefore, I will be using dilute because no, I don't want any single episode in at least 1 year. But I want to keep all of the relative scheduling that I have. That this episode is before this other episode of this show or whatever. I think more or less it's easier to get what I mean, to get the idea. And in the meantime, I will be watching other TV shows that I want. Then let's go back to incremental reading. One example, I import a large collection, or could be, not that it's already done, it's just a text about the 19th century of European history. And after a month, after reading a lot, extracting and so on, or just I import the collection built in, I realize it's too much detailed, it's interfering too much in my important medical studies, then I apply dilute. That, hey, let's make a break here and see you next season. That's it. I'm not going to see anything, so I spend all my time with the medicine, and then, coincidentally, when I have the break, the summer break, I will have time once again for history. Nice. So this is the use case of the deprioritizing an entire topic. Next is splitting or syncing collections. For any reason that you may have multiple collections and then I want to merge them or split them, that isn't the topic of this section, you will have perhaps to want to use dilute because, oh my god, let's say that this collection has a backlog, right? I don't finish the outstanding queue. Then, perhaps in a smaller collection, which I still don't finish outstanding queue, then I merge it, or just a branch, a subset of the collection. I merge it, in my case, English language, but it's so much that it's taking over. That now most of my outstanding queue is from this new branch, right? So what I can do is dilute the process before merging, and when I merge, it's already diluted. Therefore, I will see this more gradually. But that has a lot of prerequisites. It's lower priority, I don't care, it's not time bound, I can neglect it, depends on the size. So it's for time. The new branch was bigger than the entire collection, and so on. That's why the problem solution, I left it empty, because there's a plethora. There are so many different combinations that could happen. But more or less, long story short, if you, after splitting merging collections, you might want to do that. Or you can do it after it, which is what I did. I merged it. Now after a while I said, oh my god, even though it's quicker to review and easier, it's still too much. Then I can do subsets, or then I do some what? Postponing or diluting. But I do diluting on a branch. The same here. But it will have been because of a prior syncing. So in short, so the end of the day it's the same thing. Then, in short, use Autopostpone if it was butter. You know that butter is like spread? You spread butter on the bread. And dilute, it's in a drink, in liquid, like cacao powder that gets diluted in the milk. What's the difference? The butter gets a temporary break from today's outstanding items. Meaning, for every slice of bread, you will need to again autopostpone. You will need again to spread the batter. In dilute, if you have a glass of milk, it's diluted. So if you take a sip, then the next sip you don't have to apply dilute every time. It's already diluted. More or less it's like the metaphor. Therefore, it's permanent until you finish the glass of milk. The cacao is diluted in the entire glass, not just outstanding, which would be the slice. So the little review of the frequency and so on will be less important in your collection. Then, this is enough for the fluency. In the mastery, we will actually perform it for real, and then at least cheat our time in the computer to see the effects. And okay, now I see exactly what it is. Not just the definition and how to do it, actually performing it and see how many elements become outstanding each day, until everything becomes as before. So the postpone has become countered because of time, and the same for dilute. We can have the same collection once we do postpone, then do dilute, and see the pair and so on. Not in the fluency. This is enough. Now that we have seen postpone, now it's time to tackle Autopostpone. We have mentioned it, so now let's dig into it. Then first and foremost, there's Autopostpone, meaning it will be triggered every day after the day cutoff in your collection, automatically. So you need to trigger it yourself. But why there's no auto dilute? Yeah, well, because auto dilute will just send everything to the future. That's it. There's nothing, no element will survive a dilute. But the postpone, there will be some criteria, as we will see, and makes more sense to have auto-postpone. Then, what's the core problem? Learning overload. You face excessive volume, it's impossible to zero it every single day, and creates a traffic jam. That's not the problem. It's like saying, hey, you have a head and 2 eyes. You should fix that. I'm sorry? Why? It's absurd. That's why you should never target to see the outstanding queue empty. Please don't. I will repeat this in every single occasion I have. Then, what does Autopostpone do? It's a feature, it was designed, by the way, in the 90s or, on early 2000s, because of performance reasons. Meaning that you couldn't have 22,000 elements in the standing queue. It was too many calculations to change shift the order, recalculate all of this for the computers of back then. Now, not anymore. Then, what did that? That's why it's auto-postpone is actually a matter of taste if you want to use it. Then, automatically reduce the load by pushing back, postponing, low priority material. Well, yes and no. Because there are some criteria, and the criteria of the priority can be ignored. Usually it's meant for pushing lower priority material to a feature and spend time on the higher priority. It's meant for that. But again, the user in SuperMemo has a lot of power, and you can neglect this if you really want to. This allows you to get closer to the ideal space repetition scheduled, so you actually do the repetition in the day that is scheduled, that becomes outstanding, for the items of higher priority, the ones that matter the most. And the lower priority, if you do the repetition late, it is what it is. If you do it massively late, like some years late, okay. And if you ever don't see it again in your life, it is what it is. You have done a wise choice. That is to sacrifice the lower priority to spend time on the higher priority stuff. Then, there's a great separation. High priority gets protected. It receives through interrupt space repetition, and the lower priority, the threshold, can be anything, depends on your collection, the one you set, and so on. Whatever the threshold, can be postponed, not necessarily because there's more criteria. It has been postponed more than n times, cannot be postponed further, and some other. And it's handled more like a traditional learning. Exactly, because you lose the space repetition scheduling, basically. But you do it on the lowest priority material. Then, why this matters? You skipping the middle. Without it, you're stuck in the middle. You cannot achieve perfect space repetition because the volume is too high. Linear delays across all items, or most of the items. Then, that's why auto-postpone is turned on by default. You have to turn it off. With it, you achieve a clear focus. You ensure the most critical knowledge is retained, the major things, more or less, in plain English. And the minor ones, they will be perpetually waiting for you. They will become outstanding next week. You don't do repetition, has been postponed for years. The interval is 5 years already, or 10 years. Still not do the next repetition. How you access postponing? Learn, postpone, and auto-postpone. Now I can tell you it's off, because there's no check mark. If I click, do you want to postpone repetition leftovers now? This will reduce your today's load of material to learn. That means when you turn it on, it applies postpone. So you don't have to wait until next day, cut off. That automatically will apply postpone. As soon as you turn it on, it applies it, and then after tomorrow, after the day cut off, it will be automatic. I don't have to press anything in the menu. But remember, you can actually cancel, as I did. Therefore, seriously speaking, you can turn it on without executing it. Now it's on. Do you see that the postpone has a check mark? Means it's activated. But remember, it will execute it with those criteria. Remember that. We're going to see the benefits of Autopostpone. Remember, we have the same problem as before, the repetition tsunami, the workload. Too many repetitions, it's overwhelming. So quote, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Trying to review everything perfectly can lead to reviewing nothing effectively. Exactly, you need some triage. Then, pro number 1 of Autopostpone. Prevents burnout and protects motivation. Burnout, I mean, this is psychological. If for you, looking at outstanding queue and does not finish the outstanding queue, it's problematic, which is purely psychological, will prevent the burnout. If you are a true free learner, you wouldn't care about this metric. It's not 0. Okay, look at the temperature outside. It's not 0 either. It's totally irrelevant. Then, as soon as the workload is manageable, meaning what you see every day here, it's something I can do, 24 reps. I can manage that. That's because I did on a spread some videos ago. Yeah, but I overruled the scheduling algorithm. So I cheated my way to achieve that. So that's for you, and this protects your motivation. Oh no, they're keeping pile up, and this makes you give a SuperMemo. This will prevent that. Even though you will pay quite a high cost, but you're gonna still do it. Pronoun number 2 of using Autopostpone in SuperMemo prioritizes your most critical knowledge because you spend time on what is not postponed, which will be the higher priority stuff. So the must know, nice to know, and so on creates the fast lane. And then the diminishing returns, the details, they will be postponed. Those are extracts with lower priority because are digging into details. They will be absolutely gone because they will keep postponing. It's like medical triage. You have too many patients, you will get the most critical first, and that can be saved. Meaning, if there were memories, that can be retrieved, not forgotten, and they are the highest importance, higher priority. So the other ones will be left to die, basically, left to be forgotten, for the analogy. Pro number 3 of using Autopostpone in SuperMemo is that maintains the integrity of a space repetition only for the subset that matters the most, meaning of what is not postponed. So the leftovers, you maintain the integrity of a space repetition because if it's high priority and this was scheduled to become outstanding on Friday, you will do the repetition on Friday. The opposite is true. For the rest that has been postponed, you will completely neglect the space repetition because you keep postponing and changing the date. So, hey, the optimal date to review this is next week. Yeah, it will be in 6 months. Thank you. Because it's low priority. So it depends on the priority protection. Unless you would say that protects the space repetition within the protection you are setting on the criteria. If it's 10%, then you keep the integrity of 10% of your collection. Meaning all of the elements that have 10% or higher priority, we could simplify that you do the repetition dead on the day that it was scheduled by SuperMemo. The rest of the collection will be very different. And pro number 4 of using Autopostpone in SuperMemo is that it provides flexibility for life, for real life, because this is unpredictable. I started using SuperMemo that it was unemployed and I had a lot of time, right? Now I had a full-time job. Now a full-time job and a master's degree, studying a master's degree. Now I have a full-time job, a second job, and even a third job that I don't have time, right? Like that. Like now, I'm doing this course at the expense of my free time. Meaning, I use SuperMemo or I do the course about SuperMemo. I cannot do both. But it's eventually, I will finish the course and I will have more time. That means, hey, now I use Autopostpone more aggressively because I have less time. And I want to take most of the value of the 10 minutes or 20 minutes I have daily. That then I have 2 hours. Then I can relax. I will still could use Autopostpone, but with a more relaxed settings, so I can protect a higher range of priority. It was 2%, now it's 10%. It's something good. So Autopostpone acts as a safety valve, allowing you to schedule to bend without breaking, and it stops a single bad day for turning into a long week backlog, causing you to quit. The is hell, or the review hell, whenever you want to call it. And this is flexible for anything. Remember, this is per collection. What I say is always categorical, so it's easier to follow. But with the case that, no, I have the same time. I had 2 hours a day before, I have 2 hours a day now. What happens that in this collection of language learning, I only spend 10 minutes a day, right? But now I want to spend more time. I want to focus more on the language, so I can relax the postponing only on that collection. In my main collection, stays the same. You get what I mean? Rule of thumb. Now that we have introduced the auto postpone, let's see the downsides, as almost everything in SuperMemo, when you change the defaults, you know you have a lot of power to overrule SuperMemo. As always, there are pros and cons. So let's see the cons. First, it's a trade-off. So if you have it on, you're gaining something at the cost of something else. If you have it off, you're getting something off something else as well. It's not a magic wand. And it's a triage tool, damage control. So you focus on higher priority items and expand elements, not just items, at the expense of reviewing lower priority items. You're not going to see those. Now let's continue with the first risk or downside of Autopostpone. Postpone items don't go away, they are simply delayed. This can create a massive hidden backlog of unreviewed material, and for a long collection that has had Autopostpone for years or decades, this can be 80% of the collection is postponed perpetually and has never been seen ever again. Imagine an analogy is that I have, instead of a collection, I have wardrobe. And what I do is that, I bought this t-shirt, but I clean it, I put it in the wardrobe, but I'm not going to use it, wear it again, because I don't like it that much. I like this one better, right? So only when all of those are not available, I'll be wearing this, right? Because it's lower priority. But what happens? That I keep buying new stuff, new clothing. Therefore, there's no opportunity for the piece of clothing to make it out of the wardrobe. Let's continue with the second risk or downside of using Autopostpone in SuperMemo. Defeating space repetition algorithm. Why? Because it is calculating the optimal intervals with the goal that you will need the fewer repetitions to keep those facts in the long-term memory. If I'm super late on that, I'm no longer through to the optimal. So then, why do I want an algorithm that calculates the optimum if I don't respect that? Or I will respect that up to my priority protection. So an item below that is defeating the purpose. Then, lower priority doesn't mean no priority. When those items are pushed back, you will experience memory lapses and forget them, if they have a chance. So to follow some analogy before in this section about the TV shows, about I want a break of Grey's Anatomy, but oh, what happened? That now it's Stranger Things. Now it is one that I didn't know or they didn't exist before, so I couldn't take that decision before. It's the same as I keep importing videos and videos, episodes and episodes, and I exactly import more that I can consume, that I can watch, so I can even increase the backlog, that even if I put dilute the entire section, the rest of the episodes of the Grey's Anatomy, it keeps getting further and further away. I'm not going to see those. Let's continue now with the third risk or downside of using Autopostpone, a false sense of security. This is virtually true for everything you do to the future, not just postponing. You may feel highly productive because your daily outstanding queue is always small, it's in green numbers, it's not red that day, you didn't finish outstanding, and so on. This is not deceptive. Is deceptive. You're lying to yourself. Yes, you have finished the outstanding queue because this outstanding queue has been modified. You have cheated the outstanding queue. What about it? Why do you feel good about this? It's not the space repetition algorithm you're following. You have destroyed the scheduling because of diluting, postponing, or spreading. Why do you feel productive of something you have cheated? I'm going to repeat this every single video. Then, you're not actually mastering anything. You're actively ignoring a significant proportion of it to keep your statistics looking good. Hey, I have 95% retention rate of my whatever I do in my collection. Yes, but I'm neglecting 90% of my collection at the same time. 90% of my collection is unprocessed. I keep postponing that. So yes, you have a high recall of a tiny part of your collection. Congratulations, if that's what you want, right? It will be better that, hey, I have 88% retention recall or retention rate, but of 60% of my collection. Oh wow, that's a lot more. Let's continue with the fourth risk or downside of using Autopostpone in SuperMemo, and is that it can become a crutch. Autopostpone may mask underlying problems. It's because the formulation is not that good, therefore you leach more. It's not because you have a lower memory yourself. So basically it's poorly formulated. And you keep this habit, so all of the flashcards you keep creating are poorly formulated, or they could be better. Or you adding too much material at once, and you keep repeating this. I create a lot of material, I have too much material at once, I postpone a fraction of that. I keep creating, let's say that I do, my sorting criteria, it's very high in topics, therefore I keep repeating the same cycle. I have a ton of content, that content eventually will be applied done, therefore the only thing left are folders and items. If I have this flow, I have too many items, and if I already have a backlog that I needed to cheat and postpone, I have to do this every single time. Or, those are the two cases. Too much material at once, or that it's the quantity, or it's the quality of the material. That even though it's manageable, the quantity of items is really manageable, but the quality is so poor that you will keep forgetting. Therefore, you always keep resetting the interval. It's more or less the same effect as if you have added new material instead of repeating most of the material. Therefore, relying on Autopostpone stops you from fixing the root cause of your learning overload. That's why I suggest only turn Autopostpone on when you have mastered this. With this, you have mastered the formulation, and to match new material could be also prioritization. If you know to prioritize well, and you apply the formulation, the skills on the formulation of knowledge, this risk is almost impossible already. Then feel free. But keep in mind, you will have a risk of false sense of security, you will be defeating a special prediction algorithm, and you will have a loading depth. Those details, the deviation returns, they're always postponed. So you never process them. That's an overview of the downsides of Autopostpone. Now that we know Autopostpone, the pros and cons, how it works, and so on, now is, when should I turn it on? When should I use Autopostpone? So we have the guiding principle that use it as a tool, not a habit. Autopostpone is best used as a temporary measure, not perpetually, even though perhaps the most hardcore version will be indeed perpetually, even though it's not a mindset, but as a consequence of other stuff, becomes perpetually there. It's a triage tool, not an ideal tool. Then another analogy, in a different perspective than before, think of Autopostpone as a circuit breaker. It's designed to trip and prevent a fire, total burnout, when the system is overloaded. You shouldn't plan to run your house with a circuit breaker constantly tripping. It's a good safety measure, but don't take for granted that it's always there. And put a massive workload, so the system is permanently overloaded. Same with Autopostpone. Then, scenario 1. You're drowning with too many in the reps. You feel there are too many, you feel anxiety, and so on. Then, before moving on and giving out SuperMemo, turn on Autopostpone. Cheat the system before leaving the system, basically. Something manageable, baseline, until you regain your motivation. Then you need to keep with this perpetually. It's better than nothing. You will then do a subset of your collection, and you will do spatial repetition in how it's designed without resetting, rescheduling the intervals and so on. And the rest of the collection will suffer a lot, but you have a subset, a manageable subset of your collection, totally valid. Scenario 2. Sorry if I am too biased and I sound quite pessimistic. It's totally valid. It's just this thing that when you need the 0, indexed in the queue, the only thing that I don't agree. But it's for different lifestyles, different needs, is the best case, best scenario. Second, life intervenes. You have a major exam, you have a vacation, or I don't know, something extraordinary that my father now is elderly, I need to take care of him, and that will take a lot of time until he passes away, so eventually, I don't know how long. Therefore, I will take this decision, because if it was a master's degree or a job, I will graduate more or less that month, that year. With this is, I don't know, right? Sorry for the example if it's not the most politically correct, but it's the first that comes to mind. And then when passes away, you come back to baseline. It's something temporary that can stretch 2 years. Basically, that was my point. Family emergency can be to years. Then you turn it on proactively as a response. You want to protect the higher priority stuff. And then when you go back to baseline, you turn it off. That is actually what I did in my collection. Scenario 3. After a knowledge binge, I imported thousands of stuff, which I also did, but it's because it was from Anki and so on. You can turn Autopostpone until you manage that. The effects. That I have added a few thousands, and it will take me 2 months. You can do auto-postpone for 2 months, and eventually the algorithm will adjust and you will be able to do the repetitions when they're scheduled, more or less, unless you keep adding a lot of stuff. So the final warning, symptom versus cause. If you find yourself needing auto-postpone every single day, or to fine-tune the settings, that they need to be more strict, that a lot of items or elements are being skipped, then this is a red flag. It's not the cause, it's a symptom. You're treating a symptom, the overload, and not the cause. Could be poor formulation skills. Could be your flow, that you create a lot of material at once via subset, or because of your sorting criteria prioritizes too much the topics. You generate a lot of content and you review a lot, and you don't review items much. So therefore you're prone to this. Or you just neglect priorities. You don't set priorities at all in your collection. Something like that. That's why when you do auto-postpone the first time in your collection, ask yourself those questions. Is really a major cause, or am I hiding a symptom? If it's like this, tackle that. That is prioritization. Try to master priorities. Go review the course about priorities, which is, by the way, the longest section of the Fluency track. That is formulation. You can see the formulation course when it's available. It's independent from SuperMemo. It will be done in the future. Or you can get tutoring. The other way. We have seen so far postponing, dilute, and all of this. Now we're going to do the opposite, advance. So let's say that I want to dig more into language. So I will open the language branch in the browser. I could use my entire collection if I wanted to, but advancing the entire collection doesn't make any sense, even if you can do it. Nice. So then I will filter just items. Okay. So then, do you see, oh wow, look at the intervals are super massive, right? More into 1600 days. What I can do? Process the browser and advance. This is outside learning, as in postpone. And we can think it's the opposite. The opposite of postpone is to advance. Then I filtered the items, but I will have done the same by clicking items instead of all elements. There's some degree of redundancy. Usually, you'll want to do this for items. When you have merged collections, that the collection was ignored, or a drastic change in priorities, whatever. In the Fluency track, we're not going to cover the details or use cases, because it's heavily unlikely you're going to do that. And if you really need this, you will do a subset review without modifying the outstanding dates. That's why we'll keep it simple. Then it's asking you, input the interval range from 2 days, minimum is 2. That means that the interval needs to be a few days. I mean, it's not rocket science. If you need to advance 2 days, it needs to be at least 3 days, so you advance to just tomorrow. Easy. And the limit is 500, exactly the same limit, if you remember, of postponing. There's a slight difference between topics and items for postponing, but again, the main thing returns, and it was covered in the postponing already. I think by default it's 30, I don't know. I don't use this often. Then, yeah, let's go by 30. Well, in this case, you see I have like 60 days. Let me do 100. Keep in mind I have a lot, 58,000 elements. I am only seeing the first 40. Okay. That means that not all of the items will be advanced. Even though I don't have an advanced criteria, like the postponing, the only criterion is the interval. Well, the outstanding date with the interval. Because the interval could be really large, but to be outstanding just tomorrow anyways. Sees how far in the future in days are left, subtract 100. That's what it's doing. That means that the items that have 99 days won't be affected. Then in this case it's massive, so I will cancel because I could stare to the screen for a few minutes. But the result is the same. Then you get, hey, even though you had a subset of 50,000 elements, only about 4,000 were affected, were advanced. The interval, the average was more than 1,000 days, and now it's 687. Oh my god, that doesn't make any sense. Because what I asked to SuperMemo is to advance 100 days. This is like 300 or 400. Yes, it's because actually we're not asking the same thing. I'm not asking, hey, reduce the interval by 100 days. No. Is the days left of the outstanding date subtract 100. That's not the same of a long interval, like 1600, that will become outstanding in a year, in this case, than just, 300, but it's outstanding next week, or in 3 months. Then you have the 18 burden. Oh my god, how it's possible? It's increased, especially for this, because we are advancing, not postponing. So we are generating a higher load. We're going to have the same amount of items with fewer days. Nice. So everything, the topic is the same because we only covered items in this case. And the difference is 2.7 times of what was before. So I compressed almost 3 times as much. And periodic change and a factor, we could simplify this the same. Awesome. And now you have, I don't know if you noticed, some days here have changed. And now the dates, do you see, are not 1600, are 12, 1300. So sometimes I actually cut 200 or 300 days, not 100. Because I sorted by interval, not by next repetition, the outstanding date. Hope it is clear enough. Then, as a Fluency, just to let you know that this exists, and you may use it for kind of a short-term exam, not for cramming. It's something milder. That, okay, you have an exam, but it's in half a year, something like that, and you don't want to do subsets ignoring the outstanding date. You want to still keep the difference you have. Yeah, you can do advance multiple times if you will, multiple iterations, until you go back to something manageable of some days and weeks. We're going to see 2 subsets that are very convenient, especially after you have done a postpone or an advanced feature. If you go to the main menu, View, you know when we have concept topics, last browser, we have in the recent, look at this, we have advanced. So in the previous video, those are the 58,000 elements that were advanced. But what I did is cancel, right? I canceled midway, so I only affected 3,000-ish. I can still see all of them. Nice. And in the same manner, I can see the ones that were postponed in the latest postpone. Awesome. But wait a second. Those are not all of the elements that were subject to be postponed, the entire subset, unlike the advance. It's only the ones that were actually affected. Okay, so now it's easier to follow. Let's just do this year, 2024. Postpone now. Okay, so I just cheated my way. Then I postponed and I did 3,186 elements are affected, but some were skipped. Do you see? 1,874 were skipped. So more or less are 5,000-ish, right? We can also know that I did it on purpose, it's already there. 5,301. Nice. Then if I go to View and Postponed, Those are the 3,186 that were subject to be postponed and were actually postponed. They were not skipped. And that is the only useful one, because even if SuperMemo has more, for instance, to postpone, those are all of the elements subject to be postponed. What is this? Only 4 elements. That's BS, right? And I will have gotten all of the hierarchy here of 2024. And if I do the other one, not postponed, are the ones that were skipped. They were subject to be postponed, but were skipped because what they did, I think, is filter by priority of 50%. But this is BS once again. What is this? Only 47 elements. There were more. Then, at the time of the recording, I didn't make this assumption clear. What I know is that the only useful is advanced and postponed. That to postpone and not postponed are bogus. It's because if you have done multiple postpones, like it's backed and it gets one from, this is the previous one, this is from 2 or 3 iterations before, even though you are not at a loss, because you have the one that were what? Were postponed, successfully postponed. Since I can recover all of them anyways, here you go, I can do, if I really want, subset, and I subtract the subset of learn, of view, reason. I open this, the postpone, on this browser, I save it into a file, and then I do the subtract in the other browser. So even though it's bugged, I can still get it. That's why I suggest, if you're going to do a large postpone, especially if it's not as easy as this, that is just one branch, it's from a search, let's say, save that. So when, let's pretend I say, SuperMemo, from my entire collection, are a few thousand, okay. Before I do the postpone, is no. Let me save this as a subset, save all, and I can call it, SuperMemo before postpone. You never know. Don't trust SuperMemo with this. That means now it's bulletproof. Are there? So I just have those 2 views postponed. And if I did advanced, it will be this one. And to postpone is already saved. The entire subset was everything that was subject to be postponed. And not postponed is the subtraction of the file I saved with this one. So I load the file, and I load the subset, and I subtract the other one. If you want, you can save the file to all of those, if you prefer to be absolutely bulletproof. So remember, convenience, but only half of the convenience. It's SuperMemo. So far we have seen all of the rescheduling in bulk in this section, and for the Fluency track, there's something just remaining that we will cover here, even though it's not in bulk. It's the opposite. It's per element. And it's basically, when you have an element loaded in the element window, you can execute a postpone if you want it, or something else similar to this. For instance, Ctrl J, and appears this dialog. This is A. Let me know which interval you want to postpone it. Well, it's not a postpone, it's called reschedule, meaning that whatever was the scheduled outstanding date set by the algorithm is no, I will put something else. So here I can put, instead of 1 day, I can put 100 days, whatever, or the date. Instead of, let me use the date, and it will be January 1st next year. And this equals to 47 days. And I just did a postpone, a reschedule, in this very same item, and only this one. This is useful because I can cherry pick as much as I want. No, this is precisely 47 days. It's not a range or just postpone according to some criteria, and I don't know exactly for how many days it will be modified. But I can also have Ctrl-Shift-R, and oopsie doopsie, I have the same menu, right? Well, this, what I just did, is called execute repetition. So I'm actually not rescheduling anything. I'm forcing a repetition. In this case, is ahead of time, meaning it's not outstanding. And during this interval, I do a midterm repetition. The earlier I do, the earlier ahead I do the repetition, the most penalty I will have, because there has been no much time for forgetting, right? I'm cramming. So here again is execute the repetition today, and then I can modify the next repetition. By default, it was 47 days. So with the penalty, even with the penalty, the next interval by SuperMemo is calculated at 170. That's not the same interval I would have had if I did the repetition in 47 days from now. And again, I can put this with numbers, or I can modify by the calendar. What's the difference between them? That I lock the repetition. November 15 is the time of the recording. And oopsie, what? 123 days? Yeah, because that's the natural time that happened. So even though the interval was previously 1 day, then 47, the prior repetition was July 15, actually was postponed 4 times. That's why. Let's do it with a flashcard. Okay. Let's see the history. It's brand new. It was created and become outstanding the next day, and then, because it's a backup, it has been 2 months. Okay. Then, if I click Fine, the next interval goes to May 31st already. But not next year, but 2027 already. It's crazy. So let me go again. The interval it was just 1 day, but I was late by 2 months. That's why I have 67 days. And the interval goes already with 500. Now, I will delete this. So now it's outstanding once again. And the future, okay. No worries. Now I will do the next flashcard, which more or less is the same case, right? I just did the import, the creation, and it was outstanding the next day with 1 day interval. But instead, I'm going to do Ctrl-Shift-R to execute the repetition, and I will see the same, number 3. Do you see the difference? What's the difference? May 31st, May 3rd. Keep in mind, SuperMemo has some degree of fuzziness. So therefore, instead of 500, I got 470 something. It's within the range of the fuzziness. The difference is that I locked the repetition. And this will have a consequence, for instance, in retrievability, or look at this. The stability decreased, despite the interval increasing. For the fluency, we're going to simplify and you can do rescheduling, postponing, execute repetition, and so on. But there are some differences. First, you will say, hey, the next interval that I get is the same, or about the same. Yes, but you modify some other metrics that not in this repetition, but in the next repetition, the next repetitions will have an effect. So it's not the same as putting this to 500 days without executing the repetition, with executing the repetition. And just to let you know, there are more that we're not going to see, that I'm not just rescheduling this for tomorrow, let's say, I'm pushing it for later in the standing queue, so it could even be later today if I want to, and some others that will be covered in the mastery track because they are the missing returns already. So remember, for you, Ctrl-Shift-R to execute the repetition ahead of time can be like this, that you're doing the genuine repetition, or you just did the contents and, oh yeah, what's this, 3 different kinds of approaches. Oh, I'm here manually, I'm not executing the repetition, I force it with an interval. I'm not with Shift-Alt-L simulating it. That will be the case if I want to see the template, how it looks, question and answer. I want this to affect the algorithm. For the fluency, that's enough. So finally, we have the final boss of rescheduling features in SuperMemo, and it's mercy. In the fluency track, we're only going to see it to present, hey, this exists, but please don't use it. Don't use it unless you fully understand what it does and how powerful it is, because most of the effects are seen long term. So perhaps next year you realize, oh shoot, I messed up. That's why just don't. Wait for the mastery track to do it. Then, let's present it. So the problem is very similar to what we have seen with postponing, the repetition avalanche, right? Especially if you take a long break with SuperMemo, weeks, months, or even a few years, that then they come back to SuperMemo. But oopsie, what, oh my god, now I have thousands, or in my case, tens of thousands, or like in my genuine collection, even 100,000, 6 digits, 6 figures. Oh my god, what do you do with this? You have mercy for this. So we have an analogy. This isn't a traffic jam like Autopostpone. This is a total system collapse. It's before death, I put mercy. It has to be the dead last option you choose to do. When everything else has failed, you do mercy. Then, what mercy does? Mercy is a one-time emergency command. Should be one time. You could do it if I stretch, I don't know, once every 2 years, as long as you keep messing with SuperMemo, or you have drastically changed your usage with SuperMemo, you could do it every time you have meaningful change, and a few years. When all of the outstanding overdue repetitions, look at this example. Look at my collection. Look at the status bar. We have 29,000 and some items. Look at the topics. I have 22,000 topics, which 19,000 are outstanding. So only 23 are not outstanding. I also have these memorized topics here, 22,000. And the outstanding are 19. 95% of my collection is outstanding. And if my collection was higher, I could say 98 or even 99 elements, but 99% of my topics are outstanding. Everything is waiting for me. I'm late to most of my collection. This depends if I have done postponing, autopostponing, and so on. Then what Mercy will do is we'll reschedule by spreading them evenly. Hey, is that a spread? Huh, not necessarily. Over a feature period that you define. And this flattens the curve of your backlog, making it manageable again. Then, what's the difference, very quickly, what's the difference between spreading? Spreading is what is outstanding, move it to the future, evenly. Mercy is everything. In this case, including the 3,000-ish topics that are not outstanding, postpone them as well. And not just topics, items as well. In that case, it's not that awful. I have 29,000 items and 6,800 are memorized. Sorry, are outstanding. So about a quarter or something like that, a little more. That means that the 3/4 of items that will become outstanding quite soon in the next few months, let's say I have 10,000 in the next 10,000 items in the next 6 months, they will be pushed as well, as long as it falls inside the scope. If I have a scope of 1 year, makes sense that the items that will become outstanding within this year, they will be also moved. If I only do 1 month, I will only affect, it won't be as much. Nice. Then, more importantly, this mercy is a collection-wide operation. Postponing, all of we have seen, are thought to be a subset or the entire collection like postponing, but with criteria. So even though the scope is collection-wise, the criteria makes it a subset. Oh, if it's that priority or it's this interval, it's skipped and so on, so you do a subset of the... In mercy, it's everything. Your entire collection. Everything. Everything will be overwritten. That's why it's the last resort. You should use mercy before death, before deleting your collection, basically. Because you will overrule 100% of what SuperMemo has done. This is very dangerous. Then, it does not just affect a single branch or a few items, all of them. When you use Autopostpone, when you use mercy, it applies the rescheduling logic to every single overdue or due item in your entire collection. But depends on the scope. If you want, and now I'm not sure if it's optional, because I don't use mercy that often, you could have into account, yes, you could have into account the future repetitions as well, or not. That's why if you do a big window, like a year, hey, you're not just postponing what you have now, but what you will do in the future as well, or at least it will have been taken into account. That's why mercy is so powerful. It's too powerful. What it is? Toolkit, mercy. And I'm perplexed why mercy has a key binding. So I don't have a key binding for highlighting, for instance, but I do for mercy that I should use once per year or less often. Beyond me. Just to let you know that you have the shortcut, Shift-Alt-M. With the criteria, then opens this dialog, and this is the outstanding. Remember, this is the same as the spread. It's affecting what is outstanding, but what happens? That I know that more than 98% of almost all, but 3,000 topics are outstanding. So at the end of the day, at least for topics, I'm messing with almost the entire collection of topics. And that's what I said. Consider future repetitions. I have all of these. Okay. I want a period of 1 year. What would that be? And collecting period of the future repetitions, I want to equal this to a year as well. Update. So I will spread 114 daily elements. It's too much. I'm not going. This already is an overload. I'm not going to do this. It's way too much. And just to let you know that there's some criteria. I have videos on that if you want to check them out before the course. And this will be covered only on the course because according to my notes, mercy needs 35 videos to be covered. It's a big deal. If you want to understand what is all of these, the effects it will have, the reverse, the retain sequence, and all of this, the effects of the priorities or the effects after you have done mercy, or how you can undo a mercy with a more or less reverse mercy to counter the effect, and rabbit hole. That's why it's hey, I'm letting you know it exists, like the critical warning. Cannot be undone. And it's not easy to do a mercy to undo the mercy. It's kind of very globally, very high level. The next year, the load will be different, but what was scheduled this other day, this has been annihilated. That has been lost. That's why using mercy is like declaring learning bankruptcy. It's just before death. It lets you start fresh, but you can not get back to the original schedule. This has been lost. Use it as the last resort. Before deleting the collection, use mercy. I have done it twice, and I regret using mercy both times. Feel free to do it. Just be aware of what you're doing. You're just bombing your collection. That's all about mercy for the Fluency track. So we have introduced everything already we are going to see about rescheduling. Now we have a table to more or less summarize the main points to see the difference between them. We have seen postpone, autopostpone, advance, mercy, we have seen it, not do it, but we have seen it, and manual rescheduling. Remember, Ctrl-J, Ctrl-Shift-R to save the repetition, to log the repetition. So we'll have some cases, so it's easier to see the big picture when you want to use one over the other. So what's the trigger? Postpone is manual, and autopostpone is automatic. The name says that. Advanced and mercy and everything that is already manual, it's manual, can be triggered with one command, perhaps directly, or perhaps through the browser. But it's always manual. You decide to do this, with the exception of autopostpone, that you decide to check the box so this executes once every day cut off in SuperMemo. Collection. So this, remember, it's a collection setting. If you have multiple collections, you will experience this once per collection. The scope, postpone. Well, so, yeah, sorry, okay. We have to differentiate. I can do postpone in one element, but I also do postpone in bulk. That's why the scope is not just a single item, could be many. What the scope in the sense that to postpone, this is executed to the entire outstanding queue. And whatever fits the criteria will be postponed. Could be one, could be the case, it could be rare, but could be the case, but usually there will be many. When you do mercy, is the entire collection outstanding, the overdue backlog. It will be many elements. An advance and postpone would be the branch. So can you postpone one single element? Yes, but it can be many, one to many. Nice. Perhaps not the best phrasing, but you get the point. And when it's manual, is the item that is selected in the element window. Then common use. I don't feel reviewing this card right now. You postpone it. I will see it tomorrow. Or you just put it later today, that we haven't seen in the Fluency. Or could be the same but with a branch that I'm not in the mood for language today or in the next coming weeks. Let me postpone it. The postpone is that I have too much, I need to survive. Nice. Advance is that this was not relevant and now this topic is suddenly very relevant. So hey, come this to the future. Mercy is before bankruptcy, let's say. And manual scheduling is way. I know this better than the algorithm because I have done the repetition outside of the app, or because what I'm adding is it's something I already know very quite well. So I want to skip the first iterations, so I can put these to 1 year interval already. or 90 starting interval, something like that. Or if it's a topic, oh wow, this is too much, this is too hard, let me reschedule it in 3 months so you have time to dig down the prerequisite knowledge. Then, let's go quickly to is reversible, can be undone? No, none can be undone. The difference that if it's a postpone or auto-postpone, oh shoot, I didn't want to do that, let me recover from a backup from yesterday, let's say. The difference, if it's one element, it's one element, no big deal. But especially Mercy, you do it today, and you, I think it never works. But later, after a few months, oh wow, this is a huge overlook I did. I cannot recover from a backup from 2 months ago, right? I will lose too much data. That's the difference. None of them are reversible, but Mercy is even worse in this case, because I cannot recover from something that is from 5 minutes ago or from yesterday. Then, analogy. Postpone is like the snooze, like the alarm. That I went to sleep 5 more minutes. Autopostpone is auto archive, like the email. I only seen the email from the last 30 days. And everything else becomes archived. Advance will be like moving a meeting. That I had this, I don't know, Friday, 6 p.m. Let's put it on Monday at 8 p.m., whatever. Mercy, as we have seen already, is declaring email. Sorry. The email was the analogy of the postpone. My God. Then, is declaring email bankruptcy. So you're snoring your entire inbox. That, boom, neglect everything. A manual scheduling is like telling your assistant, rebook this meeting for 3 hours or 3 months from now, or whatever. I have an appointment, I just move it to later. Easy. But it's only one meeting. Not the entire meetings, emails I had, and so on. Then something I didn't mention is this, how it works. This is already deeply in returns. Why? Because the postpone depends on the priority. Usually you will postpone lower priority items. Not necessarily. Could be other metrics with a factor, and so on. Advance, you select elements, not just items, any elements, to a specific date. So the metric is the date, not the necessarily the priority. Mercy, you don't care. So because you rule everything. So you don't care about. So the only thing is that it's due, outstanding. The only dimension it's outstandingness, if there's a none for that. A manual scheduling, it is the precise element that exists in your face now. So more or less, it's what you should care. Then in the mastery track, before this table, that will be larger by the way, there will be up to 4 different sections for rescheduling features in bulk. So the one that is like manual scheduling will be a 5th. I didn't count how many videos, but in the hundreds. You have so much power, and if we cover what will happen with the priority, if you lower the priority now or after it has been rescheduled, it's not the same. It's not commutative, basically. And what will be the effects? And this happens, but only in this case. It is like almost the same, but not the same precisely. Like the one locks the repetition, the other one does not. Therefore affects this, and we can go to a rabbit hole for 300 videos. But this left for the mastery. Just to let you know, then you have more than you need already, because what you should do is trust the algorithm, and one final time I will repeat the same thing. Don't have the mindset that you need to clear the outstanding date, the outstanding queue every day. Please don't. Please don't. It's one of the worst things you can do in SuperMemo. You may think it's good, you will feel the euphoria every day, but long term, your performance will be one of the worst possible. So please don't. That if your case is that even if I know, cognitively I know I shouldn't do that, but I feel anxiety or I don't feel good, then the issue is something else. It's not knowledge based. It's more cognitive, behavioral, and so on. Feel free to get tutoring if you are at this level, because it's very personal. I cannot recommend something that will work for everyone. Just to let you know that some people had this, and gladly, after quite a short term, like even a few weeks or a few months, that disappeared. Nice. So this concludes this section for the Fluency track. See you incrementally.